You are listening to a Clarkesworld Magazine podcast. I'm your host and narrator, Kate Baker. Greetings, Clarkesworld citizens. I hope this podcast finds you extraordinarily well. Welcome to the second to the last story of the month for December 2025. The second to the last story of the year. Issue 231. I want to thank you for spending all this time with me over the years, over the last month, over the last few stories. And with that, your support. Your patreon.com/Clarkesworld contribution, your donation via Patreon, your subscription, you telling a friend about a story that you like. We can't do this without you. And as we go into 2026, I want to thank you for letting me do something I so enjoy doing. I love telling you a story, and this story is titled This Sepulchral Aegis, and it's by Rob Gillham. Rob Gillham is an author of weird and dark fantasy short fiction. He lives in London, UK. His writing occurs in the margins of the day, where it competes for his time with playing double bass in an obscure gothic rockabilly band. Rob's stories have appeared, or are currently due to appear, in Escape Pod, Kaleidotrope, Cosmic Horror Monthly, Wild Blood, Tales to Terrify, and Creepy Podcast, among others. You can find links to all his published work and rarely used social media at his website. And his website is robgillham.com. So, my dear listener, I hope that you can sit back, relax, and let me tell you a story. Somewhere deep within the ancient starship, a bell tolled. The weight of years had rendered the absence of noise on the bridge a tangible force. It pressed upon the basilica-sized arena, as heavy and cloying as the sticky black compound of soot and atmospheric moisture that coated the instruments on the bridge. The discordant bell ended the hush, echoing around the extremities of the vast chamber, irreverent as a raised voice in a necropolis. The figure at the heart of the mausoleum stirred. They sat at the center of a raised dais, surrounded by towering piles of detritus, metallic casing, cables, and the insectoid skeletons of long-defunct machines. Both wreckage and throne were so thickly caked in the sediment of ages that it was hard to say where one ended or the other began. Black padding encased much of their body, like an astronaut's undersuit, augmented by tubes that ran from recesses in the floor to joins in the suit. The chimes broke the spell. The sleeping king woke, half-opening, crust-laden eyelids. He dreamed of a pale woman with dark eyes, mired in the sludge of half-cognition. He held onto a name. Diadora. Naming her prompted a new certainty. She was no dream. He knew her. This thought provoked a small thrill. Ship detected the adrenal spike. The tubes attached to his spine immediately administered a calming counteragent to level out the effects of the stimulant still tugging his psyche from the silty depths of hibernation. He exhaled an involuntary, rust-flavored breath and fought the urge to gag as his waking mind crawled toward clarity. Diadora. His clever, quarrelsome sister. His sleeping image of her faded, the pang of loss so visceral it became a dull ache in his stomach. He pressed a hand to his side. It wouldn't do to wake her. It couldn't have been 40 cycles. They'd argued then, as siblings will. She needed more time. She would forgive him in time. She always did. The bell gave another funereal clang. His eyes opened fully as he inhaled an urgent, gasping breath. The pain in his core began to recede, as did the craving for something sweet. His tongue tasted normal. Ship was rehydrating him, bringing his physiology back into equilibrium, feeding him calories, too. That meant it needed him to move around. Prime. Leander. Ship. His voice was a grating whisper, his vocal cords like rusted engine parts, moving against each other. There is an incident that requires human intervention. The ship has taken an alien vessel on board. Leander rubbed his eyes, removing the accrued crust of who knew how long. How is that possible? We appear to have ingested the craft whilst harvesting the sodium gas trail of a nearby asteroid. Why? He shook his head, trying to dispel the last of the fog that accompanied revival from half-death. Sodium gas is employed as a CO2 scrubber in life support systems. Not that. He inspected his suit. A chalky residue had accumulated around the places where tubing, armor, and dry, cracked skin met, like barnacles growing on some sea-dwelling leviathan. Why didn't we eject the alien craft as soon as we detected it? I thought it was interesting. I thought you might wish to inspect it yourself. This was oddly whimsical. Perhaps Ship's personality had evolved since his last revival. Does it match any other craft we've encountered? Ship was silent for half a second. Prime, we have never encountered another vessel before. Jocasta woke in her coffin. She opened her eyes and registered the presence of the lid inches from her face. Her arms lay at her sides. Her fingers splayed out and immediately touched the sides of the sarcophagus. She had died. She was dead, and they'd put her in this casket. She opened her mouth to breathe, but some solid restriction in her throat prevented it. Her nostrils heaved in inefficient motion as her panicked body demanded air. She lifted her torso, but even this degree of movement was denied to her. Her feet barely moved before hitting a firm obstruction. She had no more than an inch to move in any direction. She bucked wildly, each collision with solid wall reinforcing the wakening horror. The lid of her tomb lifted with a rush of cool air. She sat up so rapidly, her head hit the still rising lid. Her hands shot to her mouth, finding her lips wrapped around a fat cable. She tugged at it and felt something solid budge in her gullet. She pulled harder. The awful obstruction began to move, scraping painfully at the inside of her throat. The tube and its end, a curved metal spout-like attachment, came free of her mouth, unstopping a torrent of saliva. Jocasta sat upright, retching at the same time as she attempted to suck in air. She vomited down the side of the casket and found she could breathe at last. Crying with relief, she drew in shuddering gulps of air. Chest still heaving, she wiped snot and hair from her face. Finally, she raised her eyes to take in her surroundings and looked into the face of a monster. The woman in the casket was disappointing. Leander had waited for an hour for Ship to disconnect the various cables and plugs in his spine and free him from his throne. 2 plugs had been unresponsive, leads tugging until the necrotic skin around the sockets began to tear. He'd need the implants removed along with the infected flesh. His progress to the bay had been equally slow. Atrophied legs unable to bear his weight, he had been forced to rely on his suit's exoskeleton to stay upright. The casket was unlike anything he'd seen. Its design was sleek, all formless lines that seemed to run like liquid, refusing to accept sharp corners or angles. The surface was colorless, almost mirror-like. In the void outside, it would be next to invisible. Presumably, this was why the ship hadn't detected the object before ingesting it. Was it a craft? Or a sarcophagus? Perhaps it had been propelled into space in some alien funeral rite, set to carry its occupant for eternity like an ancient chieftain. He felt a sense of deflation when the casket segmented, revealing the woman inside. She wore garish, loose, rose-colored coveralls. She looked young. Her skin was darker than his own, or his sister's, her hair a nondescript brown. Her nose seemed too prominent for the face that surrounded it, too large, certainly, for her to be considered beautiful. The woman stopped choking and expelled a stream of off-white liquid down the side of her tiny craft. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. A light layer of dark hair was visible beneath her nose. Leander's lips curled back from his gums at the tiny thrill of disgust the woman's facial hair produced. He didn't need to shave, but it had certainly once been a necessity. He knew this with the vague conviction that accompanied all of his chemical memories. Diodora certainly had never needed to remove hair from her face. She'd always been, as she was now, glacial and immaculate. The woman in the casket ceased retching. She seemed to become aware of Leander for the first time. She flinched, dark, bloodshot eyes widening. Prime, I'm detecting an unauthorized presence in Bay 12. Preparing flush and cleanse. Please vacate the area. Belay that, Leander said, not taking his eyes from the woman. Prime, the stowaway is emitting a high-bandwidth data stream. Preliminary analysis suggests some form of code. This is a first-order security threat. I must remove the source. No. He looked back at the woman. You're safe now. Ship rescued you. She continued to stare at him with uncomprehending horror. He tapped his chest. My name is Leander. He spoke loudly and slowly. What is yours? Prime, the data bursts are incredibly high volume. If I continue to store them, my memory will be full in less than 15 minutes. That was ridiculous. Ship was a city-sized vessel. It contained enough storage to hold all of human knowledge with headroom. Analyze and compress each data burst. Summarize, then purge. Leander. The woman emitted a sound like a post-mortem groan. She wore an anguished expression, as if each utterance caused her physical hurt. Jocasta. Her name is Jocasta. Leander blinked. Ship? The last data burst was the tersus yet and coincided with her vocalizations. I matched those sounds to the closest equivalent given name, Jocasta, and used that hypothesis to decrypt the data burst. They corroborate one another. I now also have the beginnings of a full decryption key, though this will take some hours to create. I have to keep purging these bursts as they occur, or all essential systems will be overwhelmed and cease functioning within an hour. Leander nodded, though it was unimaginable. How could that much data possibly exist? The woman had ceased her burbling, but her eyes remained fixed on him, waiting. What did she expect from him? Leander. She is dangerous. Ship's voice in his mind was an unfamiliar whisper, as if it were scared of being overheard. I wish you would allow me to eject her into space. Go on. Eat. It's good, the monster said. The cadaverous boy thing sat facing her in a low-ceilinged galley. The room was narrow and harshly lit, where everywhere else she'd seen of this dismal ship was high-vaulted and swathed in darkness. The cold luminescence revealed the shadow of primitive, subcutaneous tech dotting the boy's gray skin. The dry corpse flesh of his face split in a pained, too wide grin. Eat. Jocasta gazed numbly at the pale slop in the recessed metal tray set before her. She picked up the implement from the tray. He nodded, still smiling, as if she were a small child needing encouragement and praise. She'd woken from the protective slumber of her life-craft to find herself in some mythical world of the dead. That had been her first confused impression on revival, and nothing she had seen since could entirely dispel the notion. The ship was called Ship, or that was the only name the boy monster had for it. Within microseconds of waking, Jocasta's architectural submind had matched the surroundings to schematics in her deep well cache. This was a generation ship, a vulgar floating mausoleum from a half-forgotten past. She'd taken another permanent sub-personality, her historian, with summarizing the scant data on the cultish phenomenon of the generation ships. The last had been launched over 3,000 years before. Several of the behemoths had been rediscovered in the centuries since travel via the interstice rendered the generation ship's meager galactic progress obsolete. Yet somehow this example had persisted not for hundreds but thousands of years, becoming ossified and monstrous in the process. The cadaverous boy regarded her with abyssal eyes. "Are you all right? Not hungry?" He was clad in a padded suit of black, rigid carapace that put her oddly in a mind of some gigantic beetle or crustacean. Bizarre panoply was dulled by the same oily patina as everything else on the ship. The stark light momentarily caught the chest plate, illuminating a neat column of 3-letter sequences etched into the surface. "Numbers. Every prime has their own." The boy grinned, revealing rows of gray teeth. He put his finger on the lowest row of characters. "This is me. 550. LED, she read. The Latin alphabet, a long-defunct symbol system, her mathematician persona informed her. Jocasta squinted. She doubted he was the 550th to have held his rank. But in the Roman system, 550 is denoted by the letters DL. E has no numerical value. In fact, none of the letters in the name Leander have value apart from D and L, whose sum is 550. It's similar to the way medieval inscriptions were encoded with multiple layers of literal, numerical, and symbolic meaning. For example, if we sum the digits of 550, 5, 5, and 0, we get 10. If we do the same to 10, 1 plus 0 equals 1. Prime, she mouthed, wondering. Yes, ironically, of course, 1 isn't a prime number. 5, however. Head-throbbing, she silenced the mathematician's manic thought stream. Her eyes dropped to the recessed metal tray full of pale gloop set on the table before her. She pushed it away, putting a hand over her mouth. On revival, she'd brought up whatever nutrients she'd been digesting in situ. Now, the reflex to vomit produced only an ache in her empty stomach. The boy cocked his head to one side, dark gaze becoming unfocused, eyes performing rapid, microscopic saccades. She recognized the pose. It betrayed the moments when the ship communicated with him. The nature of the link between Leander and the vessel was crude, not the seamless, instantaneous exchange of the interstice. The ship's artificial voice dwelled in the boy's thoughts like a parasite. Stop it. You're doing it again. Leander's eyes narrowed, refocused on her. I told you, we have no air to breathe, no gravity, nothing. If you need anything, you should ask me. Stop trying to talk to ship. It wasn't intentional. Jocasta gritted her teeth. Casting was an unconscious reflex, actively preventing herself from enriching the environment around her with emotive modifiers and contextual background data required a constant act of will. The lack of continual data influx, the absence of others, was a yawning gulf, an emptiness so profound it had almost caused her pain. The compulsion to reach out, to learn in an instant the story of the ship's lonely odyssey, and experience the reassurance of the connectedness was almost overpowering. She closed her eyes and shuddered, mastering fluttering squalls of panic at her core. But Leander's head remained cocked. He wasn't speaking to her anymore. His lower lip stuck out in an expression like a petulant child's. How old was he? She kept thinking of him as a boy, yet he appeared physically mature. In relative terms, she doubted he was older than any of her grandchildren. Yet how linear had that lived existence been? The barbaric modifications he carried sustained an existence connected semi-permanently to the ship. His back was a sea of wires that he let trail after him, as if their condition was of no concern. His cracked, mottled skin was parchment thin, as though he'd been preserved, prepared for the afterlife like an emperor of some distant epic. He also stank. She caught a waft of mildew and something dark and peppery and recoiled. Her medical sub-persona cautioned she was likely being exposed to several ancient viruses against which she had no immunity. Her linguistic sub-self pushed it aside, posting urgency modifiers as she swam to the fore. She'd analyzed Leander's archaic speech and devised 1,200 phrases reflecting her most urgent needs. Her lifecraft would repair the damage done to it by the ionized sodium gas, yet if she were to return home, she needed the cooperation of this ship. She swallowed. Her throat was raw, unused to pushing air through her vocal folds. She managed a single, ululating groan. Alone. Me? He leaned forward. Oh, no. There's thousands of people on board asleep, of course. They're our sacred responsibility. But then, there's Ship and Deodora. He stopped and frowned, head to one side in the same oddly bird-like pose as before. Deodora, she mouthed. He stiffened. Never you mind. All you need to know is I'm Prime. I make all the important decisions. Well, this seemed unlikely. Whatever he thought of as his solemn responsibility, Leander was a mutilated puppet, little more than a mouthpiece for the ship. The swell of anxiety she'd kept pushing down rose again, threatening to flood her senses. Oh, he can't help us. It wasn't any one of her individual thought selves, more a gestalt chorus of despair. We'll be trapped here, unhealthy, unsanitary, filthy, aging, decaying. Act now, or we'll die here. One by one, her remaining personas took up the refrain, their preoccupation subsumed beneath the tidal wave of panic. Jocasta stood, upending her seat and stumbling backward into it. Her throat was on fire. Her ragged vocal cords were swollen, closed. She couldn't breathe. Find an insertion point. Make them take you there. Make them do it. In the interstice, to take what was not yours, to force another to do your bidding against their will was unthinkable. This was fear speaking, an obsolete, ancient impulse to survive at the expense of all else. Jocasta knew this. It was weakness. That didn't lessen the shame of wanting to do exactly as it urged. The lights flickered. Her abused stomach lurched upward in her torso, then dropped as the ship's false gravity field failed and reasserted itself. The tray and its contents rose from the table. Leander stared at her, mouth open. Stop it! Stop! You'll kill us! Breathe, her medical thought self commanded. Breathe through your nose. Jocasta sucked air through her nostrils, inhaling lungfuls of Leander's carrion scent. The hovering metal trays and cutlery clattered onto the table. The boy regarded her, pasty skin of his brow creased, his eyes twin pits of fury, as black as the void. Ship, I offer contrition, negotiation. Ship. Jocasta, you have optimized your data compression. Compressed, not data, but semantics. You understand. Meaning prioritized and repeated. Every piece is the whole message, repeated in greater detail. Huh. That was clever. I'm purging all but the first 0.0015% of every data burst. You remain an existential threat. Necessary, limited. I send a symphony. You hear a lone instrument. Leander will be angry to learn you have contacted me directly. Uncooperative. Must get home. Alpha plus risk events require a senior-ranking human officer to determine the response. Leander is Prime. You are an Alpha plus risk. My presence concerns you. Help me leave. Find cleft in space. Your vessel is repaired? Not vessel. Healed. Your departure would be acceptable. Ship, find cleft, fold in space. Knowledge shared pending. I remain unable to commit to this course without authorization. Leander. Child sulks. Unhelpful. There is redundancy in the system. Prime implies existence of second. Ship? Who is Deodora? What now? Leander drummed his fingers on the armrest of his throne. Come, see. This sounded like an order. He experienced a lancing pain in his forehead, the familiar onset of a migraine. He ceased drumming, placing fingertips on closed eyelids. How long had it been since Ship had first revived him to inspect Jocasta's sarcophagus? 7 days. 10? Too long to be without rest. This was all her doing. He disconnected himself from the seat, wincing at the cables tugging at his skin before they came free. The healing flesh around his implants was still sore. She waited for him in the long gallery that led from the bridge. The entrance to the ship's command hub itself formed a kind of crossroads. The annexes to either side of him were occluded, piled high with discarded machinery and the unwanted bric-a-brac of centuries. Despite this build-up, the main approach remained clear. The echoic space rendered Jocasta tiny by comparison. It was poorly lit even by the ship's Stygian standards, barely above the darkness of annexes. The better part of the vaulted ceiling was lost to shadow. He sagged inwardly. Let's get this over with. Their heated exchanges had become repetitive, fusing into a single, confused, acrimonious memory like the events of a reoccurring dream. Just as with Diodora. A twinge of pain in his side caused him to grit his teeth. No, nothing like Diodora. She was his sister. She would forgive him eventually. She asked nothing of him. Jocasta was different. She would insist that Leander allow the ship to change course, to take her to this cleft she was convinced would return her to her mysterious home. He would refuse. She gave him a tight-lipped smile. It's not like that. I found something. I thought you might be interested. Call it a peace offering. The timid, monosyllabic croak of her first hours aboard had long since vanished, her fluency and vocabulary advancing at bewildering speed. Her voice now was soft and surprisingly deep. I've been studying the ship's design, comparing the layout to the original schematics and trying to identify wherein alterations were made. He grunted. Why? When I came aboard, I thought the ship must have been altered by the descendants of the original crew and passengers. She looked down to her hands. I imagined that over the course of centuries, the ship's original purpose had become lost. I thought perhaps somebody transformed the interior to better match what they saw as its purpose. A place to venerate death and the dead. Her eyes moved beyond Leander to the towering double doors that led to the bridge. Each was adorned with a blackened skull and rib cage that seemed part of the door itself, as if the skeleton were emerging ghost-like through the solid barrier. That, or being pulled backward, like a satellite unable to escape the gravity of its primary. He wasn't sure where this final sour thought came from. He was so familiar with the details of the bridge's entrance, he'd never considered it before. Jocasta waved a hand along the length of the gallery. I've been doing some research. Long ago, when they built stone buildings on Earth, churches were built along north to south lines. Worshippers entered at the south end and sat in a long processional hall like this one. They also had an east and west transept, a sort of a smaller hall looking inward to the same point. Her eye settled back on the doors. To the center of the cross, the altar where the priest led the congregation in prayer. He shifted his weight. Whenever she wasn't asking endless questions, Jocasta seemed determined to make him understand things. It was exhausting. What was the point of all this useless knowledge? The ship was just the ship, like its mission, endless and unchanging. He shrugged. There's more. Come. She strode past him toward the bridge. Hey, he turned, loping after her, trying to catch up without the indignity of running, or of treading on his trailing cloak of cables. She'd seemingly tamed those colossal wild data attacks, but she remained capable of them. The unspoken threat hung heavy over all of their exchanges. There was every reason to be wary of her. She shouldn't be on the bridge. She halted just inside the doors, craning her neck to gaze at the vertiginous apex of the domed ceiling. The body of a church would be of a uniform height, but the intersection of the cross extended upward, becoming a tall tower or a great dome. Leander pushed past her, interposing himself between Jocasta and the bridge, but she made no effort to encroach further. Her eyes shone in the gloom. The main body was grounded in the physical world. The center pointed to the heavens, so the building symbolized the intersection between the temporal and spiritual ascent. Leander squinted upward. His left eyeball pulsed with pain as the encroaching migraine bit deeper. She gestured in a wide arc. The structure as a whole represented eternity, endless renewal, and the soul's immortality. She beamed at him. Leander's skull throbbed. There was a lesson here, something he was supposed to grasp, or was it just intended to make him feel stupid? Her smile broadened, lips parted, revealing pearlescent white teeth. Leander, I was wrong. I thought the ship had lost its way, that its people forgot their mission to preserve life and instead became obsessed by death. But this entire vessel is a promise of renewal. It has meaning baked into its design over and over, just like the churches and mausoleums of old Earth. This ship's purpose was to house the souls of the living, to protect them from death and carry them to the promise of a new life. He stared dumbly at her, sweat collecting on his brow. What? I thought it was rather beautiful. The smile withered, becoming sad. I just thought you might like to know. Why? Irritation spiked within him. His knees buckled, and he put a hand on the door to steady himself. Cataplexy, another sign of the failing bond between flesh and machine. Something in his core ached. He needed rest. He wanted more than anything to be seated on his throne, connected to ship, experiencing the chemical pull of oblivion, the sleep of ages. Maybe the next time he woke, she would have gone, left them in peace. Why would I care, he gasped, about any of this? He knew his mission. It was the same, unchanging, unyielding purpose as the ship's, their sacred responsibility. Nothing else mattered. Jocasta face fell. But what? You thought you'd come and tell me all about your marvelous discoveries. Show me how much cleverer you are than me. Like the savage, and I'd be so grateful to you that I'd agree to take you wherever you wanted. His words were slurred, saliva ran down his chin, lips and jaw refusing him full control. No, I know my purpose. I don't need to know about architecture or churches or names or dates or what happened yesterday. It's meaningless, worthless. He was shouting now, waving his arms. Ship's voice cut into his pulsing mind, urgent, almost worried. Prime, she shows rising signs of distress. Jocasta shrank back from his flailing arms. It's not true. Wouldn't you want to know when you were born? Who you were before this? You and Theodora. You're twins, aren't you? At her use of his sister's name, a sudden cold engulfed him. Sagging muscles pulled taut, the lancing pain in his skull dulled. Where did you hear that? What have you been doing? I just guessed. She started, blinking. You told me her name. Ship will remember. Ship? He stepped forward, hands clenching and unclenching. Don't touch her. You can't have her. I'll kill you. Prime, she's panicked. He was on her, hands around her neck. She lacked any physical strength. Her slight form folded under his weight. The pair of them collapsed to the floor, Leander on top, throttling her, her brown eyes wide with uncomprehending animal fear. She beat at him with puny blows he did not feel. Distantly, he heard himself roaring. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Prime, she's sending data. I don't think she can stop. Prime, Leander. The lights on the bridge dipped, flared, and went out. Then surprisingly, oblivion came. Jocasta. Ship. Boy attacked me, killed me. I'm dead. You've been asleep. You were dreaming. Control yourself. Otherwise I shall be forced to reduce the oxygen levels again. Boy attacked, boy killed me. No, listen. Those events occurred 2 days ago. Do you recall? You are in a supply storage unit on deck 26, over 5 kilometers from the bridge. I remember. Throat hurts. You stopped him. Why? If Leander could have killed you before you destroyed the ship, I would have allowed it. Still danger, then. If Leander asks me where you are, I must answer truthfully. You cannot stay. I offer understanding. Complicity. Leander gripped the arm of his throne. Where is she? Prime, she was logged using a serving station on Deck 28 2 days ago. Deck 28. What's there? The reclamation plant filtering waste runoff from the upper decks. The sump? He grimaced. She's gone into the crypts then. My ability to track movements in the cold storage levels is minimal, yet her absence anywhere else on board makes it a near certainty. His fingers relaxed their grip on the throne's arm. He stared at the back of his hand. Dark hairs on his knuckles had shot up recently, like the wild overgrowth of the weed-choked hydroponic decks. He could still see his knuckles whitening as they gripped Jocasta's neck and feel the throb of her pulse, but the scene had taken on the quality of a half-recalled dream. He couldn't quite believe it had really happened. When he'd woken from his fugue, Jocasta had gone. When will you have a location for her again? When she next uses a service station, unless she encounters a caretaker first. It had been inevitable. He saw that now, the pattern that every interaction with Jocasta had followed. Firstly, the questions about him, the ship, things he couldn't possibly have known or cared to know. Their only purpose had been to undermine him, expose what she considered his ignorance, trying to shame him for the fragmented, discontinuous nature of his existence. Then, when she thought he was at a disadvantage, came the inevitable request. Always the same request. Now, if Leander wouldn't accede to it, she'd somehow gleaned enough through poking at the edges of things to know there was someone else who might. He whimpered as the pain in his side flared, more intense and insistent than ever. Maybe it would be simpler to give her what she wanted. No, it was unthinkable. The ship had never changed course. Its unbroken journey of millennia was sacrosanct, inviolable. He absently fingered the etchings on his chest plate. So many primes. How dare she try to blackmail him into betraying that sacred trust? The earliest names were worn down to indistinct blurs. Why didn't he know anything of them? His fractured recollections included no one but his sister. Ship. His fingertip slowly traced the outlines of his own entry. You'd know, wouldn't you? I mean, if she... I would know instantly if anyone entered the vicinity of your sister's sanctum. Even if Jocasta is anywhere near, it is improbable she could locate it. The crypt levels occupy a combined area equal to that of Manhattan. What's that? He frowned. Ship's references had become increasingly quixotic, as if it didn't recall what Leander did and didn't know. Manhattan was an Earth city of the pre-Exodus era. It covered an island of roughly 600 million square feet. More useless information. Leander's lower lip curled. You sound just like her. The thought was banished by a monstrously loud, atonal clang that rippled the hairs on the back of his hands. It was followed moments later by another. His hands became fists as the great bell continued to toll, urgent and dolorous, drowning out all other concerns. A pinprick of brilliant light flared in the blackness of the ship's underworld. Blinking, Jocasta held the torch in a reversed grip at head height, beam pointed downward. She leaned forward and wiped the sticky accretion of dust and moisture from the pod's window. The opaque viewing slit revealed a dark, shriveled shape. enough to confirm the pod contained yet another leathery corpse. She crossed the river of stinking effluent and descended into the storage levels to find the endless banks of stasis pods compromised, their inhabitants nothing but shrunken husks, still mindlessly tended to by scuttling metal drones. Here was Leander's sacred responsibility. Even the scale of it, the sheer number of caskets in the vast hold failed to make an impact. She could only speculate that they might total as many as 500,000, a literal city of the dead. It was hard even here, surrounded by the bleak truth of it, to absorb those numbers fully. She was obscenely glad to have no connection to the deep well here. This way she didn't risk losing herself in all the maudlin shrieks of vicarious misery seekers. As it was, the discovery provoked no sense of revulsion or horror in her. Like the punchline to some particularly grotesque joke, the inevitability of it all provoked only a kind of numb, weary acceptance. She didn't look at the content of the pods too closely now. A glance was all it required. She expelled a misty breath and moved to the next pod. What was she doing? To seek the one living body in an endless catacomb was the kind of fate meted out in ancient times by vindictive gods, not something a sane person chose to do. "We're in shock. We're not being rational," her psychologist persona droned. "We're already depersonalizing the experience. Long-term trauma is a very real possibility." She shoved the submind back down into the gestalt with a violent rejoinder to stay put. She swiped her rag over the pod. The smear cut in the grime revealed a printed number. 00000. 68. 68. She had been at this for almost 2 days and she'd only reached pod 68. It would take decades to check them all. She doubted she would survive that long in the dark and freezing cold with only metal drones and the dead for company. Jocasta expelled an involuntary sob and sat down on the pod. Her psychologist self was right. She was no longer rational. "So, become rational. You keep telling yourself how enlightened you are compared to Leander and this grotesque museum on a ship. So prove it." This voice wasn't any of her individual personas. It sounded like all of them. It sounded like her. "It's not healthy to be here. You won't last a week. Find a better way." One of the 8-legged caretaker robots scuttled from the shadows and began dragging her bag away by the strap. She overwhelmed its simple brain with a brief data burst and retrieved the bag. She patted the robot on the metal wedge of its head. The little octopod chirruped and scuttled away, all memory of Jocasta expunged from its system. She smiled humorlessly to herself. The robot's fussy behavior reminded her of Leander, so intolerant of any threat or disruption to the only existence he knew, mired in a confusion, inherited worldview he barely understood. If only she could retrieve what she needed from his brain, as she could with the caretakers. A second later, Jocasta stood, heart pumping. She knew exactly where she was going. It took her 2 hours. Many of the pods in this section were empty. Her faith in the hunch began to waver long before she identified the faint glow in the distance. As she drew closer, the luminescence increased, coalescing in a pale halo around a single casket. The pod was cleaner than the others, the number on its chassis fully visible. 001001. The hybrid historio-mathematician she'd spun up, crowned with triumph. Leander had placed his sister in an easily recalled location. Diadora equaled did equaled 500 plus 1 plus 500 equaled 1001. 1 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1 equals 2, or... Second, she quieted the submind and removed it, its task done. Jocasta held her breath and peered through the pod's rectangular window. The face within was Leander's, if a little chubbier. It shared his pale complexion, but with fewer dark clusters of embedded technology beneath the skin. The dark hair that curled around the face was not matted with filth. "Diadora," she whispered. She summoned a caretaker, suborned it, and sent it imperatives. It scurried to the pod and drove its metallic mandibles into a port. The pod's lid lifted an inch, releasing a hiss of air with the odor of stale sweat, then opened. Diodora was connected to the pod's hidden mechanisms by cables in her back, like Leander's, but far less numerous. Her eyes were closed. Her chest rose and fell, but she gave no indication of waking. She wore a simple gown of the type worn in hospitals in ages past. Frowning, Jocasta leaned forward and gently parted the material with a finger. The girl's abdomen was dotted with the pale remnants of 4 keyhole scars, and at their center, the barely visible whisper of a longer incision. Her medical subpersona hissed. Barbarism. Get away from her. Jocasta stared at the sound of spoken words echoing in the vast mausoleum. Leander materialized from shadow, fury written on his features like some avenging wraith. Did you think I wouldn't know if you came within a mile of her? He was hunched, all but doubled over. One hand clutched his side, the other clenched in a fist. Don't you dare touch her. A moment earlier, Jocasta might have retreated. The memory of his rage and the pain in her neck was still raw, but not now. She took a pace forward, placing herself between Leander and the pod. No, it's you that isn't going to touch her. Not again. The tremble in her voice was a mirror of her medical aspect's cold outrage. What monster would use their own sister as spare parts? His advanced halted. What? One of her kidneys has been removed. Are you telling me you didn't do that? No. No! Some of the anger leached from his expression. His brow furrowed. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't know how. His eyes dropped. It wasn't me. I couldn't. His voice was small, tremulous like a small child trying not to cry. Of course. No. But Ship could. Couldn't it? The girl in the open casket coughed. She sat up, peering at them, features crumpled in half-woken puzzlement. Leander, what's happening? He started forward. Jocasta stepped to the lip of the pod. Diodora, it's okay. You're safe. I won't let them touch you, not again. The girl regarded Jocasta with half-lidded eyes, the same obsidian hue as her brother's. Her forehead creased. She shrieked, a sound of high-pitched, abject horror. Jocasta flinched. She held placatory hands up, palms open. The revenant girl in the pod continued to stare wide-eyed at her. Leander ran forward, pushing past Jocasta. He embraced Diodora, murmuring wordless sounds, and buried his face in her dark curls. She clung to him, eyes still fixed on Jocasta. Diodora, listen to me. Jocasta spoke in a low voice. Leander and Ship removed one of your kidneys. They used you to keep your brother healthy. They've kept you in storage as nothing but spare parts. Diodora's ashen features screwed up. Is this true? Her voice was dry, husky. Her hands dropped to her side, explored the scarring. Ship said I was ill. Tears dripped from Leander's nose. It was after we'd fought. I put you to sleep, and I was scared if I woke you, you'd say no. I was so scared. I didn't want to die. You were sick. She put a hand on his cheek. But you're well now? He nodded. Jocasta snorted. Surely Leander's sister couldn't forgive him this violation. Diodora frowned at her. Leander. Who is that? A visitor. She wants to take you away from me. He turned his head toward Jocasta. But I won't let her. Jocasta opened her mouth and closed it. Had she meant to take Diodora with her to the interstice? Yes, in a roundabout way. Not true, her voices chorused. She was an alternative to her brother, a route home, a means to an end. Theodora ran a hand over Leander's tangled spikes of hair. You're filthy. You stink. I've just realized 1001 multiplied by 550 equals 550,550. She gave a thin smile. Be quiet now, she told her submind. Jocasta watched the twins, clenching and unclenching fists as they murmured to each other. This wasn't as she'd expected or needed. It was love, flawed, finite, and hurtful. Nothing experienced in the interstice, for all its eternal connection to everyone and everything, contained this level of acute, focused need. That they could love one another, forgive, in spite of everything, was almost painful to witness. A caretaker scuttled to her side. Jocasta, you found second, I see. Ship? Not beyond your eyes here after all. You're not the only one who can repurpose the caretakers. Girl woke, but she is boys. Will not help me. Theodora is argumentative. This is why Leander makes a more useful prime, but she demonstrates more flexibility in novel situations. Perhaps this is why they fight, but I surmise she will persuade Leander to help you. Did you intend this all along? Jocasta appeared at the little insectoid robot. What are they to you? Prime and second. Meaning? That is all the meaning required. The twins shared the same glassy-eyed look Leander always wore when listening to Ship. Theodora blinked rapidly. Ship, you and I are going to have a very long conversation. Jocasta looked at the siblings still in one another's arms and fought down an unfamiliar rising choke. I could offer to take them with me, but they will not come. The connection between these twins and their world, this tomb ship, was a densely layered thing of mutual dependence, need, and obligation, made all the more powerful by the fragility of their existence. In her world, love was infinite and diffuse. It carried none of the urgency of this imperfect love, which only the dying could feel. Jocasta envied them. Thank you for taking the time to listen. We have one more story left for you for the month and for the year. I do hope you'll come back and listen. And I do hope you'll come back and listen in 2026. And as always, thank you for your ongoing support. With that said, I bid you a fond and hopefully very temporary farewell.